Chapter 866. Qin Imo lowered his body, his black hair still damp from the rain. His fingers landed on the seatbelt. Bojiu didn't think that the Almighty would let her off just like that. But even though she was prepared, Bojiu didn't expect that after the seatbelt was unfastened, his long and beautiful fingers didn't leave. Instead, they moved down her waist and landed on her chest. Bojiu raised her hand, arching a brow. "Brother Imo, what are you trying to do?" Bojiu watched as the person in front of her glanced at her collar calmly, a faint smile on his lips. "It seems like you were serious when you asked me to hold it back then. What? Aren't you going to hold my hand and let me check its elasticity?" Dark history. Bojiu felt that ever since she knew the Almighty, every memory was a dark history. He didn't give the youngster any time to react since this time, Qin Imo was serious. He reached out and blocked the narrow car door, his left hand reaching under the hem of her shirt to remove the cloth. His movements were so fast that even before she could resist, she was already at a disadvantage. Her back was facing Qin Imo and one of her hands was cuffed, limiting her range of movement. The Almighty was formidable. Knowing that she was good with her legs, he decided to stay in the car. "I'm more interested in your body structure than your reason for dressing up as a man." Qin Imo looked at the person in his arms. His ink-black eyes were tainted with a deep darkness. He pressed his body over and pressed his lips against the back of her fair and elongated neck. His deep voice caused the temperature in the car to rise to the extreme. Bojiu straightened her back, not wanting to expose any weakness at this moment. Qin Imo chuckled, his slightly cold lips moving upwards, landing on the tip of her ear. "Just as you wish, let's try it out?" "Brother Imo, I thought we were going to have a good talk." Bojiu wanted to move her wrists but they were cuffed. She wanted to move her right leg but it was pressed down. Qin Imo arched a brow, his face reflected in the car window making him look noble. Even with her back facing him, Bojiu could see his face. His black and sharp hair, his handsome and robust body made him look like a devil in the night, extremely dangerous. "All the time, isn't it?" He smiled and flicked his finger. His breath landed behind her. "What? You don't like this method?" An electrifying heat surged through her body at the contact. Bojiu trembled uncontrollably. His body temperature seemed to have started to go out of control along with the temperature in the car. However, that voice didn't seem to have any intention of leaving her ears. His cold fingers wandered wantonly on her smooth skin. Then he gripped her tightly. "It's really soft and feels good. It's so realistic that not only can it fool some otakus, it can even fool me." This time, Qin Mo's smile was a little cold. "Smart. Why does this sound so familiar?" When she thought about it carefully, she realized that those were her own words. The Almighty's ability to hold a grudge was too good. Bojiu seized the last chance to get up. "I can explain." Qin Imo pressed her back down, his breath thickening. His fingers didn't have the slightest intention of withdrawing. The softness under his palms still carried the delicate fragrance of jade that made his body heat up every time he thought about it. She felt that at this time. Chapter 867. But it's not suitable here. Qin Imo pressed his forehead against the back of the youngster's head, putting up a final resistance. The sweat on his forehead flowed from his well-defined chin to his neck, which was already burning hot. "At least there's a bed that would make you more comfortable. Even though it's safer here, I can't bear to torment you for an entire night." With that, Qin Imo had already stood up and unlocked the car. Bojiu's eyes were burning with passion. By the time she realized what was going on, she had already been carried horizontally. Qin Imo passed her his jacket. His long legs were straightened. Beneath the white shirt, his body was tall and fit. The raindrops fell on his hair, but it didn't affect his elegance at all. Madame Zhang watched as her young master carried her in. She wanted to follow but when she saw Qin Mo's side profile, she retreated silently. The wall lamp was switched on, the light was dim. The second she was thrown onto the bed, the light was dim. The moment she was pushed onto the bed, the jacket was pulled open, the shirt was soft and thin, sticking to her body. The hand that was pressing down on her palm made her unable to move at all. The glass window wasn't closed, the wind blew in, lifting the white curtain. Qin Imo didn't give her a chance to escape. The white shirt was half open, the hem rolled up, revealing the youngster's waist. Her skin was fair and slender, just as he had imagined countless times. It was extremely flexible to the touch, and as she twisted, the curve of her waist was even more shocking and alluring. Qin Imo chuckled, landing on one knee on the bed, one hand holding onto her chin, the tip of his tongue entering, twisting and sucking. No one would be able to withstand such a kiss. His hand was still moving downwards, needing the most vulnerable spot. Bojiu wasn't Qin Mo's match in this aspect. Her eyes were misty, she couldn't help but let out a low moan. Qin Mo's entire body went numb, the strings of his rationality snapped. He reached out to separate her legs. He had never wanted someone as much as he did at this moment. His heart was beating like a drum, his soul was drifting. Especially when he saw the youngster frowning slightly, her body trembling slightly. He wanted to possess her completely. So much so that his predatory nature was completely revealed. Especially when he saw the youngster lying on his bed. Her clothes were still on, her black hair messy, and her left hand was still cuffed. Her body was as clear and cool as a bright jade, faintly outlining her abstinence. Such abstinence stimulated Qin Mo. It was as if he was being sucked into a whirlpool, unable to resist. Looking into those eyes, Bojiu knew there was no way she could escape today. As his long legs rubbed against each other, he couldn't find any point of resistance. His body was still terrifyingly numb. Bojiu knew what the Almighty was planning. She bit her lips, her consciousness blurry. All the sensations in her body seemed to come from the series of numbness. Only one thing was clear. The knife that was hidden somewhere could not be used. That would hurt the Almighty's hand. Thinking about it carefully, it was just having sex. If after this she could have a child that belonged to her and the Almighty when she left, it was not necessarily a bad thing. After having this idea, Bojiu turned the tables, pressing his hand down. I don't like to be passive. Chapter 868. Before Bojiu could fully comprehend the meaning of his words, Qin Mo had already carried her. Qin Mo had already hugged her, and the two of them switched positions. At this moment, Qin Mo was below her. His shirt was half open. His chest was faintly glowing. The lines were smooth and tight. It was tough and captivating. Bojiu sat on Qin Mo's sturdy waist. She watched the man who could bring chaos to the world. He held her waist with one hand, his gaze like a broken black diamond. When he looked at her again, the coldness and sharpness had settled into the depth of the moon. It was as though he could suck her whole body in. There was a kind of man who was so handsome that anyone who saw him would be tempted, regardless of gender, if he was willing. Previously, Bojiu had a taste of the Almighty's ability to seduce people. She had thought that was his limit. What she didn't know was that when he took off his black trousers and laid there with his clothes completely unbuttoned, the masculine charm that erupted from him was really inescapable. Especially when the sweat flowed down his chiseled face, past his chin and stopped at his collarbone. Probably anyone would want to lay their hands on him. Bojiu was no exception. She had always told him what she liked since she was young. That was why she had wanted to use her little keyboard to exchange for her pet the first time she had met him. In the end, he had complained that her keyboard was too old and didn't want her money. She had been depressed for a long time because of this. Every day she would climb through the window and watch as he read. He would feed her impatiently, his little face cold. He had even warned her, "You can come but you can't dirty my book." She had indeed run around and her body was dirty. But a child should have some innocence. Besides, as the boss of a district, how could she not display her dominance? But since her pet had said so, before she went, she would wipe her face clean. She had to bring a gift when she was a guest. This was the Bo family's teachings. But every time he wasn't interested in the things she brought. Later, for some unknown reason, her canine pet became interested in her electronic devices. After washing her hands, he dismantled the Overlord game console that she liked. Then she received a small drone. She liked this person. She liked it too much. She had to hesitate. His identity wasn't suitable. If the Almighty wasn't a criminal psychologist, if the Almighty was just a second-rate criminal psychologist, there was probably no such thing as being reluctant to part with him. She wouldn't fall in love with him anyway. It was because he was neither. Before meeting the Almighty, Bojiu didn't think there was such a person. It was pure and powerful like a light that was not affected by the darkness. That was why she wanted it so badly, but she was worried that her identity would be exposed. He would treat her coldly. After all, it wasn't just him, even she was very clear about this. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. She belongs to the night. And he should always be in existence standing on the altar. However, she had also said that, if the Almighty kissed her again, she took him away and raised him. Even if he didn't carry her away, he had to sleep with her once. Thinking of this, Bojiu smiled and lowered her head. Her face was extremely handsome. Brother Imo, I gave you a chance to reconsider. Chapter 869. In that instant, the gentleness in the bathroom seemed to have been sucked away. All the warmth came to an abrupt end. Qin Imo froze. Even his long fingers that were hugging the person in his arms tightened. Qin Imo lowered his lids, sweeping a glance at her face. His lips were pressed into a thin line, his brows thick and his nose high. His beautiful eyes were like a whirlpool without a hint of emotion. His gaze was cold enough to tell how he was feeling right now. Anyone familiar with Qin Imo would know that he had always been elegant and polite. Even when he was in a fight he would always smile. But now, the murderous aura rising from his body made it so no one dared to approach him. It was still drizzling outside the window. Qin Imo placed the person in the blanket, the room turning cold. Bojiu wasn't fully awake. In her blurry state she seemed to hear someone asking her, "Why did you leave?" It was a low and moist voice, hoarse. Bojiu was exhausted, falling into a deeper sleep. The night sky darkened. Princess, who was curled up on the glass balcony, was unusually quiet today. It wasn't because of anything else but because it didn't dare to create a ruckus. After today it finally understood one thing. In the past, it had always thought that it was impossible for that fellow to lay a finger on its master. But now it seemed like the other party was too strong. Its master hadn't been able to resist even when she was pinned down. Sigh. As a cat there was nothing it could do about it. It was already so late but there were still sounds coming from the kitchen. Madame Zhang would definitely wake up. But when she saw the tall and slender figure in the kitchen, she was stunned. She wasn't sure what her young master was thinking. His eyes were dark and deep as though they were a bottomless abyss. Madame Zhang walked over. "Young master, let me do it." Qin Imo shook his head. He was cooking noodles in a pot to ensure it wouldn't turn cold. He carried it upstairs with one hand. Madame Zhang watched from the back, hesitating if she should tell Madame that her young master had brought young master Jiu home today. Even Auntie Zhang could tell that today was different. Qin Imo rarely cooked, so he wasn't hungry. He knew clearly who the noodles were for. He looked at the person lying on his bed. Her black hair hung down and covered her face, revealing only her chin. Her sleeping appearance was very pleasing to the eye. But Qin Mo's narrow and dangerous eyes narrowed. He chuckled coldly. "You haven't learned your lesson." As soon as he finished speaking, he leaned forward. While he was half asleep, he was forced into a state of ferocity and numbness. He was unable to extricate himself, and even his toes were trembling. Bojiu felt as though she was in a furnace. She exerted force on her fingers and couldn't help but let out a sound. When she opened her eyes, they were blurry and misty. It was supposed to be a punishment, but at this moment, Qin Imo felt as though he was about to melt in it. When he met her gaze again, he couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed her waist and rained down on her. The white window screen was blown up, and even the lingering scene gave people an extremely beautiful and dreamy feeling. The sky was bright. After the rain, the sky in River Town was very blue. The sun shone down from the east, speckling the bed. Chapter 870. She tilted her head and woke up for real. Her entire body was sore, especially her legs. But it couldn't compare to the lingering redness on her neck. Bojiu's eyes dimmed. Her first reaction was to look at her chest. It was an obvious mark, but fortunately he had taken care of it. If not, yesterday's situation. The moment she thought about it, Bojiu's ears turned red. It was better not to think about it. Bojiu arched a brow. Her skin was fair and she wasn't wearing a top. When she sat up, the sunlight seeped in, scattering the blankets like snow. She looked extremely beautiful, but the cold and lazy aura was still there, like the snow that had been covered in dust for a long time. She didn't get off the bed immediately. Instead, she wrapped herself in the blankets. Coincidentally, her eyes met Princess's glassy eyes. She couldn't resist the urge, grabbing the cat over and squeezing its paws. When Qin Imo pushed the door open, this was the scene he saw. His gaze was as deep as the night. Be it the bed, the person, or the cat, they all belonged to him. He didn't want to let go of any of them. Bojiu glanced up when she heard the noise. When she saw who it was, she restrained her hands. Honestly, the Almighty was the person Bojiu didn't want to see the most right now. Mainly because her motive for sleeping with him wasn't pure. But Bojiu had an evil and cunning personality. She wouldn't be able to do it no matter how shy she was. Hence she took the initiative. "Brother Imo, do you have anything to eat?" Qin Imo arched a brow. She wasn't shy at all. He reached for the bowl on the side of the table and lifted the lid. The fragrance of the pork bones seeped out. Chopped green onions were placed on the noodles. The bones were soft and looked good. Just from the looks of it, it wouldn't taste bad. The only thing that made Bojiu feel awkward was the fact that the Almighty had fed her personally. When their eyes met, it was inevitable for her to avoid his gaze. But she knew that the Almighty loved cleanliness. When she slurped the noodles, she was rather serious and didn't drip any soup. If the Almighty hadn't said faintly, "It's my first time." Bojo paused. What did he mean? Chinamo watched her, his expression nonchalant and noble. Since you slept with me, you have to take responsibility. What do you think? Slurp. Bojo swallowed the noodles, instantly realizing that this was a trap. She couldn't help but remind the Almighty, Brother Mo, girls are at a disadvantage in such matters. Really? Chinamo opened his official Weibo and found a Weibo topic that many people had reposted. The topic was, which Almighty in the esports industry do you want to sleep with? Without a doubt, Chinamo was at the top of the rankings. Spade Z came from behind, and even though he had a good momentum, he was only ranked third. Who do you think is at a disadvantage now? Chinamo played with the lighter in his hand. His black hair fell down and he smiled slightly. Bojo looked at the data. For the first time in her life, she had the urge to be first. I've never been in contact with other girls and I don't confess to anyone. Therefore, I won't meet someone and say that I've confessed to them. The voice that was pressed against her ear was still very pleasant to hear. But why was every single one of them talking about her dark history? Chapter 871. According to the Almighty's words. Indeed, she was the one who had the upper hand. She remembered the comments the internet gave the Almighty clearly. The first half, Chinamo is the only beauty in the world. The second half, it's a pity he can't sleep. Bojo felt that she needed a cigarette to calm herself down. She reached out to push her hair aside, revealing her exquisite features. Brother Mo, give me a cigarette, I need to think about it. Chinamo chuckled, his cold gaze sweeping over the youngster's face. You mean you want to smoke after bed? Bojo. Why did she seem to be going overboard in front of the Almighty? Chinamo passed the thin cigarette into her hands. But as he leaned forward, his other hand reached into the blanket. Bojo widened her eyes in shock, her fingers stilling as she held onto the cigarette. What is it? Not used to it? Chinamo leaned his head against her shoulder, his handsome face tilting slightly. His breath landed behind her ears, his voice carrying a hint of laziness. Weren't you used to it last night? Chinmo's hand touched the back of her waist. It was smooth and slightly cold. He couldn't help but slide his hand inside. That was why Bojo had such a reaction. Don't hide, I'll let you touch it. Chinamo pulled her into his arms, his voice sounding as though it was a normal thing. I can't let you sleep for free. Bojo shrunk slightly. Every part of her body was warm. She didn't manage to smoke. Instead, she was taken advantage of. Every part of her body seemed to evoke that familiar numbness. But there wasn't even a piece of clothing by her side. In the end, Chinamo stopped, afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. Bojo's beautiful face was flushed, even her hair was in a mess beside her ears. She seemed to have been taken advantage of. Indeed, she had been taken advantage of. But the person who had taken advantage of her was truly evil. Do you like it? Chinamo chuckled lightly, pressing his lips against her ear. You had the same reaction last night. Jill was still shy, the tips of her ears turning red. She continued to argue. Brother Mo, can we talk about it? Can we not talk about what happened last night? Hearing this, Chinmo's smiling eyes turned cold. Sure, let's talk about how you're going to take responsibility. Bojo knew she couldn't escape. She arched a brow. Are you sure you want me to take responsibility? I'm afraid you'll regret it. Regret? Chinmo crossed his long legs and looked at her with his deep eyes. He was still so perfect. Seems like you have a feasible plan. Does it count if I want to kidnap you to the Fifth Avenue? Bojo almost blurted out. Fortunately, she was rational and wasn't tempted by the man in front of her. Nothing much, I just wanted to hear how Brother Mo wants me to take responsibility. Bojo caressed her nose. They were at the negotiation table, it wasn't the time to feel guilty. Chinmo's lips carried a smile, forming his own noble air. It wasn't that warm. How do you think a man and woman who have sex should be held responsible? Bojo glanced up at him. She wanted to say something, but in the end she didn't avoid it. Instead, she went straight to the point. It depends on the situation. After talking for so long, you've never thought of taking responsibility. How could Chinamo not understand the youngster? He stood up from the bed, his eyes still as deep as the sea. They were very beautiful, but the ocean had already sunk during their conversation, all the warmth sucked away. It seems like I really have to handcuff you for you to learn to be obedient. Chapter 872. Bojo knew she had to take responsibility for this matter. In reality, she wanted to take responsibility more than anyone else. However, one day in the near future, the Almighty would definitely regret the decision he had made today. Hence, she couldn't allow things to develop to that stage. Bojo only wanted one thing in her entire life. When she was young, it was Chinemo. When she grew up, it was still Chinemo. He lay back down, raised his arms, and covered his eyes with a sigh of regret. There would always be someone like that. It's something you can't get no matter how much you want it. Because she was afraid that one day that person would look at her differently. Bojo had once thought about how great it would be if the Almighty could belong to her. She wasn't good at cooking, but she was good at instant noodles. Besides, she was good at earning money. The Almighty liked to read about deductions. She could build a huge bookshelf for him. But she could break away from that. Most importantly, she could arrest the criminal. She was a hacker and had been on the list every year. Other than not hurting people, her methods of doing things were not allowed by the law, nor were they allowed by the Almighty. It was one thing to clear her name, but it was another thing to capture her. The Almighty had already expressed his intentions clearly. Bojo knew that it was a good thing for her. No one except the Almighty would want to help a criminal. That was why Bojo had been shocked. She had even wondered if there would be a glimmer of hope. But the reality was that they were both black and white. Helping her was because the Almighty only cared about the matter and not the person. In the future, there was such a day. After her identity was exposed. When the Almighty wanted her to take responsibility, she would definitely bring him home to raise. More importantly, the Almighty's suspicions wouldn't be dispelled so easily. Bojo was right. If not, Fatty wouldn't have been studying the computer in the police station. The next day he had some news and called Chinemo. Young master, I used the system recovery function and there are indeed traces of operation on the D drive. But the traces are missing, so I can't be sure if the computer has launched an attack. Fatty scratched his head and said, that's because those traces might be a cache created when something was downloaded. Speaking up to this point, Fatty paused. Young master, the computer in the coffee shop is clearly the one with the traces of a network attack. Why is young master so interested in this computer? Chinemo didn't answer. Instead he asked, if we set up a mature defense program and pass it to someone else, will it affect its use? If your skills are good, you probably won't. Fatty was telling the truth. I've never played like this before. Chinemo listened to Fatty's words. In his mind, the youngster was indeed calm, even calmer than him. No matter how much his body liked it, his eyes were still clear and overly rational. She had always been like this, never taking anything to heart. She could start at any time and she could also end it at any time. Thinking of this, Chinemo clenched his fists. His black hair covered his body as he stood tall and straight. His expression couldn't be seen at all, but it was gloomy and cold. Chapter 873. Young master, are you saying that Z might have transferred the firewall's operating system to another computer and got someone else to activate it to divert our attention? In reality, Z isn't in the cafe but somewhere else? Fatty wasn't dumb. Combining the questions his boss had asked him before, he deduced the answer in one go. But it's too difficult to do that. Not only does it require the implant to have superior network skills, the person working with it has to be good at seizing the time. Fatty still felt that the possibility was low. Chinemo glanced up, his voice calm. Don't forget, Z is on the move. In other words, nothing was impossible. Fatty paused for a moment. Indeed, he felt that anything was possible. Chinemo tilted his head, lighting a cigarette for himself, his long fingers holding it. Have you checked the surveillance cameras in the cafe? You didn't miss anything? Yes, I've checked all of them. Because this coffee shop is a well-known chain restaurant, and there are a lot of people coming and going, it's impossible for the staff to remember every customer. There are an average of thousands of customers here every day, and the person using the computer didn't seem to order anything. Instead, he went straight up to the second floor and sat by the floor-to-ceiling window. Unfortunately, the surveillance camera at that position was broken yesterday afternoon. We did make an appointment to repair it at night, but it happened while we were repairing it. Fatty knew that when explaining the case to the young master, the more detailed the better. Chinemo took a puff of the cigarette, leaning against the wall. His chiseled face was shrouded by the smoke, his expression hard to see. It seems like someone got the information on the commercial square before the crime squad did. They even knew which surveillance camera was broken. It's not simple. Yes. Fatty paused, seeming to have thought of something important. But there is something. Young master, do you remember the surveillance video you asked me to pull out? According to the customers on the second floor, the person sitting in front of the computer was wearing the cinema uniform. Even though no one saw his face, the key point is that he was wearing the cinema uniform. Young master, I asked a manager of the cinema. He said that before the incident, there was a problem with the locker and it was one of their staff who informed him. But when he asked about the follow-up work, the staff disappeared. He was puzzled too. We all know what happened next. Someone handed the contents of Yu Hongliang's locker to the police. Fatty paused and forced himself to ask, "So, young master, shouldn't you get rid of your suspicions about Little Spade? It's obvious that the person who pretended to be a staff member was the one at the coffee shop, and Little Spade was playing games on the 5th floor at that time. It doesn't seem possible." "Is that so?" Chinamo glanced at the flickering cigarette. "Then tell me, why did he disappear after the competition? He didn't even put on his uniform." Fatty choked and couldn't say anything. Chinamo fell silent. Fatty's logic wasn't wrong this time. The results were completely different from what he had written. Chapter 874. Brushing past each other in the cafe, we can basically see what the other party is wearing. That shouldn't be a problem. Fatty spoke of his conjecture. But it was the most logical conjecture. Chinmo's eyes dimmed. It's a perfect crime, there doesn't seem to be a single flaw. Fatty didn't know what else to say. Usually when young master said such things, it meant that he didn't fully believe the outcome. Chinamo reached out to pour himself a glass of wine. When he placed the ice cubes in, his gaze deepened. "Tell me, what did you find from the car keys?" "Ardwolf is in charge of this, we will have to wait another day to get the driving records." Fatty scratched his head. "Young master, Supreme Alliance will be heading to the neighboring city in the afternoon to prepare for the second match. You and Little Spade, you guys?" He had heard that young master had handcuffed Little Spade last night. Handcuffs? How much hatred and resentment was there? "It seems like you are really interested in my private life?" Chinamo asked slowly. Fatty replied immediately, "No really. I think it's better to keep Little Spade alive if we are to face Lin Qintao." Brothers, he had tried his best, risking his life to protect Little Spade. Fatty glanced at the endless messages in the Alliance's WeChat group. But he couldn't understand why the voice on the other side of the phone had suddenly turned cold. There was an indescribable wetness in it. "I want to keep him but he isn't willing." With that, his boss hung up the phone. Fatty was confused. What did he mean by willing? Little Spade wasn't willing? That wasn't possible. Little Spade had threatened to torture the other party until they called him daddy. Fatty didn't know that Chinmo's unwillingness wasn't what he thought it was. At the main house of the Qin family, Madame Zhang was still in the kitchen. She walked over with a plate of fruits, pausing slightly when she saw the wine glass in Chinmo's hand. It wasn't her young master's style to start drinking before noon. Besides, he had been fine before, but now Madame Zhang could clearly feel an indescribable feeling. It was cold, but there was something else. Fortunately, Chinmo didn't stand there, turning around. "Madame Zhang, bring me a set of clothes, something young Master Fu can wear." Okay. Auntie Zhang felt that this was right. If there was anything that two people couldn't talk about, there shouldn't be a Cold War, right? Upstairs, the handsome youngster looked at her phone. After reading the message, her eyes turned cold. She deleted it and sent a few words over. "There's a problem with Rao Rong, I need to keep an eye on him." "How are you now?" "Good, the same movie uniform you asked me to prepare is very useful." Hoshino sat at the very end of the line, but he couldn't hide his jade-like presence no matter what. The person next to him saw that he was sending a message and poked his head over. Who is it? Who is it?" "Take out." Hoshino put away his phone and looked at the comic book in front of him. Chapter 875. With that, he scanned the surroundings. "If the opponent is Xianhuan, what are your chances of winning?" No one spoke. After a second, someone removed the magazine covering his face. Someone lifted the magazine covering his face. He had a handsome face and hair longer than a girl's, but it didn't affect his aura at all. 100%. The club manager smiled, his eyes shining brightly. "Good, that's what we need. I'll go discuss the price with the investors and the sponsorship." Before the manager could finish his sentence, Hoshino stood up. Hoshino stood up, stuffing a hand into his pocket as he headed towards the door. Before he left, he tossed a bomb. If Supreme Alliance and not Xiangnan were the champions of the National League, the chances of winning wouldn't be 100%. After saying this, he walked out of the conference room. The manager widened his eyes. What does he mean? What does Hoshino mean? He means it literally. Mei Nan laughed, asking the member beside him in a flirtatious manner, "Your vice-captain went to watch Supreme Alliance's competition again yesterday?" "He went? I don't know, but he didn't sleep in the dormitory yesterday." "He really went." Mei Nan caressed his lips. "Why is he so interested in Supreme Alliance?" Outside the door, in the deep corridor, Hoshino glanced at the photo of a certain someone smiling faintly while playing. His lips curved upwards. He really wanted to have a match with them. After all, he had never seen Z in that photo before. Second floor of the Qin family's house. Bojio glanced around. She didn't have any clothes to wear, so she put on the jacket that the Almighty had left on the rattan chair. The advantage of being tall was that she could wear the jacket as a skirt. She was so self-reliant because she felt that she had to clean up the bedsheets. It wouldn't be convenient if Madame Zhang did it. Anyone who had been there would know what had happened when they saw the red. It would be best to keep the fact that she had slept with the Almighty a secret. Bojio wasn't good at household chores, hence she wasn't gentle when she removed the bedsheets. Princess stomped on the wooden floor, his hair about to explode. It was fine if she had thrown a pillow, but she had thrown it at his head. Was she doing it on purpose? Also, how stupid must you be to not even know how to remove a bedsheet? Even master is better than you, meow. Chinamo also realized that every time he went out and came back, the person and the cat in the room would definitely cause trouble for him. The moment Chinamo walked in, Princess had already returned to her nest in an arrogant manner. With a domineering expression, she started to bite her fake mouse, as if she had not participated in the incident and had not bitten the bedsheets. Bojio arched a brow. She looked at the cat's betrayal and disdain. Then she glanced up at the Almighty. As smart as Chinamo was, he knew what was going on. You can't even settle a bedsheet? Geniuses are bound to have some flaws. Bojio raised her fingers, finally pulling the bedsheet out. Chapter 876. Chinamo suppressed the thoughts in his mind. When there was only warmth left, he pulled her into his arms. Bojio paused. She was surrounded by the Almighty's scent, the scent of tobacco mixed with a hint of alcohol. It wasn't heavy, but when mixed with the scent of plants, it was indescribably pleasant. It was easy to lower one's guard. But the Almighty's hand went numb. Bojio tried to dodge, but she was pressed down. However, she was pressed down and a faint voice said, "You don't want to wear your clothes anymore?" Ever since the Almighty had entered, she had noticed the thing in his hand. She reached for it. Chinamo shifted his hand away, his gaze deep. Stay. What did he mean by stay? Bojio arched a brow. His long and fair fingers drew out a white strip. That was... Bojio's ears turned red. She knew what the Almighty was about to do. He tore her jacket and went around her back, his voice right beside her. Do you know that this will stop you from growing? What growing? Bojio dodged the cold and numbing breath. She felt her chest tighten. She stopped talking and his fingers slid down her body. Anyone would want to retaliate after being manipulated like that. Chinamo pressed down on Bojio's raised wrist slowly. Do I need to remind you that you slept with me for free? I'm just helping you wear your clothes. Why aren't you willing? Do you want Madame Zhang to send the clothes over personally and see you naked on my bed? Mamach? Bojio arched a brow. Before she could say anything, she lifted him up and placed him on her lap. He was really helping her wear her clothes. But when his fingers brushed past certain areas, her face was so red it looked like it was going to bleed. Her heart was racing. The Almighty seemed to like it, his lips curving upwards. She bit her lips, the corners of her eyes glistening as she watched the man's sculpted side profile. The Almighty seemed to always be like this. Regardless of the situation, he would never damage his looks. Even his figure was calm and elegant. Even though he was doing such a thing, the Almighty took about 10 minutes to put on a simple t-shirt and long pants. In the end, Bojio could only bear with it. He couldn't really let Auntie Zhang in. In reality, Bojio didn't even need to think to know that she was the only one who could make young Master Qin serve her personally. It would be a lie if the cat said that it was not jealous. The princess raised its big face and deeply felt that it had lost its master's love for it. What do you want to do with the sheets? Chinamo tilted his head and asked the person on his lap. The coldness in his eyes lessened. Surprisingly, it felt good to help a certain someone put on clothes. He could try it every day in the future. Of course, the prerequisite was that this person was obedient enough. With this in mind, Chinmo's gaze deepened. Wash it. At this moment, Bojio felt as though she had armor. She could finally roll up her sleeves and face the Almighty head-on. She had to remind him that this was her first time as well. But the Almighty's shamelessness was right here. At this moment, he stood up and glanced at her, his voice faint. Auntie Zhang made your favorite pork ribs. Go down and eat first, I'll wash the sheets. As the Almighty spoke, he rolled up the sleeves of his shirt twice, revealing his porcelain and beautiful wrist. He was like a walking mannequin hanger. He picked up the bedsheets and strolled into the bathroom. Bojio hesitated for a moment before following him. She stood at the bathroom door and watched the Almighty's next actions. It was very orderly. Since young, Bojio had admired people who could do housework well. Not to mention the Almighty, who was handsome, had a good aura and was good at work. Chinamo seemed to have caught sight of a certain someone. His beautiful brows arched. Actually, it was hard not to see that face. That face was blessed by the heavens and had a strong presence. Even though the color of her hair had changed, she was much more obedient. But there were some people who couldn't change their arrogant aura. Indeed, she didn't seem like a girl. He couldn't be blamed for not recognizing her. Of course, that wasn't the case. Another thing was that she was good at disguising. Z was the same. Aren't you hungry? Chinmo's hands were stained with white foam. His black pants were straight as he tilted his head to support the sink. It was a different kind of handsomeness. Bojio leaned against the sink lazily, a handsome smile on her face. Let's go down together after Brother Imo is done. Come over, Chinmo instructed. Bojio arched a brow. What? Help me light a cigarette, the lighter is in my pocket. Chinmo used his chin to point to his long pants. Bojio wasn't afraid of a cigarette. She took one over. The man didn't take it, instead he lowered his lids and bit it with his lips. Even Bojio had to admit that the Almighty couldn't shift his gaze away, especially when he pressed down on the lighter she had raised. His lashes lowered and the smoke filled the air. Bojio found this Almighty a rare sight, especially in life. There was a cigarette dangling from his thin lips, his long and beautiful hands covered in foam. He stood there in his white shirt and black pants, tall and handsome, giving off a manly vibe. Who would have imagined that young Master Qin would wash the bedsheets like this? Bojio clenched her fists tightly, suppressing the urge to lean over and kiss him. She blushed for a long time, turning one round. When she turned the second round, Chinmo glanced up. Chinmo lifted his lids. She must have washed the bedsheets clean, water dripping from her fingertips. That was when Bojio realized that a man like the Almighty was worth kidnapping both in bed and out of bed. She had to be more discreet. She didn't want to expose her ambition. Everyone knew Bojio's ambition to kidnap Chinmo. The Almighty was probably the only one who wasn't aware of her ambition. What were you thinking when you circled me twice just now? The sudden voice made Bojio feel guilty. She avoided the deep eyes that seemed to be able to see through everything. She smiled, revealing her canine teeth. Washing the bedsheets doesn't seem to fit your image, Brother Imo. I grew up in the military and washed the bedsheets myself. Chinmo's tone was calm, as though he was describing something normal. Bojio felt that the Almighty's upbringing was really good. It was probably because of his pure red background that the Almighty was able to develop into his current self. In the past, she had interacted with many powerful descendants, but there weren't many like the Almighty. The person who shouldn't have to do housework was actually good at housework. But he grew up in the military? The Almighty had really forgotten everything about his childhood. He didn't have any memories at all. What exactly had happened back then for the Almighty to become like this? Chapter 877. The temperature outside the window rose slowly. At the same time, in a certain luxurious district in Jianghu City, the girl's expression was extremely dark. She ignored the people beside her. She had the habit of ordering takeout, otherwise she wouldn't have so many takeout bags. Besides her, there were two other people in the room. One of them had a tattoo on his arm while the other was tall and skinny with a sharp mouth. What should we do next? Didn't they say that China isn't good at criminal investigations? Why are they doing so much this time? Even the car is being investigated. If this carries on, we will have to change locations. The tattooed guy wasn't bothered. What are you afraid of? We have a backer too, haven't we already contacted them? Some people are only interested in money, it's normal for them to give up on clues. Besides, it's just a car, it's just a test. Do you think we won't be able to do anything if we really meet them? Don't forget the crime squad still has. Enough. The girl cut him off. Rao Rong will be here later, don't tell him about this, including what we are trying to do with you Hongliang. The tall and skinny guy chuckled. Of course we know that. Rao Rong is the same, we have been together for so long, what haven't we done together? Why can't he understand some things? I'll slowly work on Rao Rong's thoughts, but he hasn't had enough time. He hasn't been in the esports industry for long and he's still thinking about his old teammates. I can tell that he's moved after coming back, but once a person turns gray, it won't be easy to turn white again. Rao Rong is too naive. Don't bother about him, get your contacts to ask if there's an expert hacker in the crime squad. Who exactly is this person? I want to know everything about him. At this point, the girl's eyes darkened. As for the car, it was scrapped. The clues we found were limited. Don't worry, we're not Chinese. Even if we find something one day we can just leave. As for the rest, we have the help of the person above us. What's there to be afraid of? Besides, I received news that a new criminal expert will be joining the crime squad. Another one investigating us. The tattooed guy frowned. How is that good news? The girl chuckled. You don't understand. In China, relationships are always complicated. Even between officials, there is a need to consider the bigger picture. How should this person be moved and how should that person be placed? Turning a blind eye is the best way for everyone to get along. The higher-ups said that the criminologist was recommended for the sake of performance. After all, we caused such a huge commotion and anyone who managed to catch us would be considered a merit. But here's the main point, with one more person, it would take time for Qin Mo to mobilize the crime squad members. The tattooed man's eyes lit up. Are you saying that Qin Mo's power might be taken away? But he is the Qin family's. The Qin family will not interfere in this matter. The girl interrupted him. It is not within the scope of our duties. Chapter 878. The tall and slender man listened to their conversation and moved his mouse. Then he paused. I think you guys should come over and take a look at this. Someone did an analysis on the forum. Some hacker said that we aren't Z, we're just imitating Z. Don't bother with this kind of person. The girl smiled contemptuously. If he has the ability, let him find evidence. Saying that I'm imitating? Don't tell me Z's hacking skills have become exclusive to him? What a bunch of stupid hacker fans. I have my own stuff, they'll know in the future. Go do what you have to do, go do what you need to do. As soon as she finished speaking, a man in a black hoodie walked in. His handsome face was cold. What's going on with you, Hongliang? The tall and slender man stood up. Rao Rong, lower your voice, the checks are very strict. He didn't just sleep with others, right? Rao Rong's gaze wavered. Other than those damn women, what else did he do? The tattooed man didn't think much of it. It's just to get some goods out through him. Why are you so agitated? Merchandise. Rao Rong's gaze trembled. Powder? As he spoke, he turned his head and looked at the girl. We said that we would only punish those who deserve to be punished. What do you mean now? The girl glanced at him, placing the things in her hands down. Her face was still as sweet as ever. Don't be so agitated, Rao Rong, you have to know that no matter what you do, you need funds. If not, how would you be able to return to the esports scene? Rao Rong clenched and unclenched his fists. The girl looked at his expression and smiled. Alright, let's not talk about this anymore. You still have a competition tomorrow, so prepare well. This is what you like the most. The higher-ups have also sent news that if you win this match, they will make a lot of money. You can also continue to stay in the esports scene. The club has already prepared to renew your contract. In the future, not only will you be able to compete, but you will also be able to do some live broadcasts. Rao Rong glanced at her, retracting his hand. I only compete. Alright. I'll just play in the competition. The tall and slender man interjected, placing his arm on the man's shoulder. What's wrong with you, Hongliang? If those women behaved themselves a little and didn't go after those rich men, this wouldn't have happened, right? There are always people who make things like ice powder. Now that the checks are strict, we won't sell too much. Rao Rong tilted his face. He was dressed in black, his gaze deep. I've said it before, I won't lay my hands on ordinary people unless they deserve to die. With that, Rao Rong pushed him away and walked out of the apartment. Do you really think you're a plaything? The tattooed man didn't have a good temper. He glared at Rao Rong's back view, his eyes filled with malice. Why do we need such a person to join us? The girl wasn't happy, but she knew the effect she had to achieve. Because of his identity and his understanding of Qin Mo's tactics, 100 crimes committed by a stranger can't be compared to a single crime committed by someone close to you. This is the most effective way to deal with Qin Mo. Rao Rong's emotions aren't stable right now. There are some things that we need you to do. Spade Z, the member of Supreme Alliance's starting lineup, help him create more trouble. We should prepare for a real sacrifice, to let Qin Mo know that there are some things he can't do. In order to obtain a person, one must first destroy them. Chapter 879. Rao Rong walked out of the apartment. The emotions in his eyes hadn't calmed down. It was an indescribable pain. He couldn't bear to. Because he wanted to come back. Because he wanted revenge. But he had assumed that the revenge would be in the esports arena, using the strength that those people had mocked him in the past to decide the outcome. And those black-hearted businessmen who had been protected. But he was getting more and more confused about what he was doing. The phone in his pocket kept ringing. Rao Rong slid the screen open, Lin Chintao's voice coming from the other side, the liveliness almost warm. Captain, where are you? Everyone is waiting for you. Hurry back and bring me a bowl of fried noodles. I'm afraid I'll be hungry after a 2-hour train ride. I heard Supreme Alliance will be in another carriage. I'll only be able to play with Spade Z and the others after I'm full. I have to win in terms of aura. Rao Rong didn't say a word. Even he didn't understand why the annoying voice would make him feel so at ease at this moment. It was probably because there wasn't anyone else who could think of him that way anymore. There wasn't a single person left. Rao Rong stuffed a hand into his pocket, his voice hoarse. I'll be there in a minute. The other end broke into laughter. Hurry, it's the National League. That was right, it was the National League. The National League his father had always wanted to see. Our Rao Rong, he's really good at gaming. He'll definitely bring us the championship. The moment he closed his eyes, he could see the face in his memory and the cold expression in the end. He had never believed that his father would commit suicide. That day he had been waiting for him. Rao Rong tightened his grip, the phone heating up along with his eyes. In the end, he stuffed his phone into his pocket, his back view arrogantly entering the taxi. Lin Feng was also rushing him. He had hesitated for a long time before making the call. Mainly, there hadn't been any news from Little Spade. When their captain had left yesterday, he had been exuding a demonic aura. Making the call was akin to asking for trouble. Thinking about it, it wasn't easy for Lin Feng to be in charge of the harmony of the team. On the other side, the Qin family had just started their meal. In Bo Jio's words, the Qin family's delicacies had always been particular. It wasn't luxurious, but it was the authentic northern way of eating. Just the sight of it was enough to whet one's appetite. The spiced beef was cut into large pieces and there was chili oil at the side. The best way to eat it was to dip it in and take a bite. But obviously, someone didn't allow her to eat spicy food. They only asked Auntie Zhang to place a small plate far away from her, right beside the Almighty. This made it impossible for Bo Jio to sneak a touch. She rested her arms lazily behind her back, sitting like a playboy. Her face was still handsome, but she seemed to have lost all meaning in life. Auntie Zhang wanted to laugh as she watched from the side. In the end, she made a small green onion pancake for the young man. She added some meat sauce, cut some cucumber strips and wrapped it around the beef. The aroma lingered in her mouth. Bo Jio shifted her attention away from the chili oil. Her table manners were elegant and manly. Half of her face was puffed up as she ate the pancake. Her appetite was shockingly huge. Qin Mo arched a brow and placed some food he didn't like on the youngster's plate. Bo Jio didn't say anything and just swept the food. She had been like this since young, eating carrots that pets didn't like. Madame Zhang shook her head. She was starving the child. Chapter 880. Qin Mo scooped soup for the youngster while placing his phone on the dining table. Lin Feng's call came in at this moment. Bo Jio paused when she saw the caller ID. She arched a brow and said playfully, "Senior Lin, pick it up." Qin Mo didn't free his hand, his handsome face expressionless. Bo Jio bit her chopsticks casually and leaned over to swipe the phone. "Hello." On the other end of the line, Lin Feng was a little confused. Wait a minute, why was that Little Spade's voice? Lin Feng moved his phone away slightly, glancing at the number he had dialed. It was his captain's, he didn't make a mistake. Are these two together? Lin Feng's heart was in turmoil. How could they be together so soon? The Fu and Qin families weren't neighbors like the Yun and Lin families. It wasn't even an hour's drive away. Besides, their captain had been furious yesterday, he was obviously going to punish her. Little Spade. Lin Feng asked for confirmation. Bo Jio smiled devilishly. That's me. You're actually able to stay by captain's side unscathed. Lin Feng couldn't help sighing. Bo Jio arched a brow. What was this? I even slept with your captain. But she couldn't say that in front of the Almighty. We're eating. He meant that it wasn't convenient for them to talk. Lin Feng was a smart person and understood his brother's hint. Come to the train station after you and captain are done, the train is at 2 p.m. We'll talk on WeChat. Bo Jio was curious about what Lin Feng wanted to say. The moment she turned on her phone, her WeChat vibrated. Qin Mo lifted his lids and swept a glance at the youngster. He could roughly guess who had sent the message. His deep gaze shifted away. It was good to let Lin Feng teach this fellow a lesson. Otherwise she would just throw her uniform away and leave. Lin Feng's main attack. Little Spade, just confess. Where did you go after the competition yesterday? You have no idea how awful Captain's expression was. I even suspected he was going to dig 3 feet into the ground to teach you a lesson. He didn't just dig 3 feet into the ground, he even blocked the ceiling, preventing me from displaying my handsomeness. This was something Bo Jio couldn't say, so she asked, why did you change your WeChat ID? Main attack. Where was the attack? It's all because of Hu Zi. **CK, I suddenly feel that he's really scary. Lin Feng paused for a moment, then said, let me put it this way. Some time ago during the school exam it was just like usual. I was first and he was second. How many years has it been? Ever since junior high school it has always been like this. After all, there are some big questions that he doesn't know how to solve. But in the end, this morning I took a look at his draft. He wrote all the big questions and they were all correct. Tell me, what is this person thinking? Bojiu glanced at the message. Since she had slept with the Almighty, she understood the basic thought process. She replied in a comforting tone, Senior, it wasn't easy for you to survive until now without sleeping with Almighty Yun. Ever since she was young, she had always given in to one person. Wasn't it all for the sake of eating it in the end? Just like how she treated the Almighty. Chapter 881. Would you be able to sleep with Yunhu with just 3 of you? Bojiu was doubtful of Lin Feng's fighting ability, but in order for Almighty Yun to sleep with Lin Feng, she suggested, you can try and sleep with him, let's see who can sleep with him. No matter how naive Lin Feng was, he wouldn't use this as a test. He hadn't forgotten what Yunhu had done when he had entered the room that day. That huge fellow had been terrifying. How exactly did he develop? He had even sneaked a peek at his diet to see what he had eaten. He hadn't eaten any chives either. **CK, if it was real. No, it couldn't be real. Lin Feng was irritated and replied, why don't you try it out with Captain and see who can sleep with whom? Is there a need to try? Bojiu didn't want to brag about sleeping with the Almighty as it would attract too much hatred. I'm still eating, let's not talk about it. Lin Feng replied, wait a minute. What? Bojiu arched a brow. Lin Feng coughed lightly. It's like this, I've been doubting my own charm recently. Don't worry, to Almighty Yun, you don't have to do anything and your charm will still be there. Bojiu smiled devilishly. Lin Feng replied, I'm not talking about him, someone else. Someone else? Bojiu paused. Who is it? A girl who confessed to me she was too sincere, I couldn't reject her. Lin Feng's tone was obviously showing off. You don't know, but after I found out about this, I've been thinking about how to describe this to you guys so that you guys will believe that I'm not bragging. You guys? Bojiu arched a brow. How many people did you tell? A few in the Alliance chat, Lin Feng replied, sending an emoticon with a cigarette in its mouth. Bojiu chuckled. I thought you would persevere till the end of the National League, but now, Senior Lin, you're just forcing me to give in. Good luck, the Almighty and I are going out. After being reminded by the youngster, Lin Feng suddenly thought of something. For example, a certain someone had said that during the National League, it would be best for him not to find a girlfriend. Otherwise it would affect his mood. If he was in a bad mood, his skills might also drop. This was clearly a threat. He was someone who cared about the whole team, so he should reject the girl first. First of all, he wasn't afraid of anyone. Let's do that. Lin Feng thought hard for a while and said seriously, for an esports player, playing games is the most important thing, so I'm sorry, I can only disappoint your love. After sending this reply, Lin Feng took a look at the Alliance group chat. What worried them the most was that Yunhu didn't say anything in the group even though he was there. So, did the other party see his words just now? Lin Feng thought about it and decided to test the waters from the side. He opened a private WeChat chat window. Bro, how about we play a game? What are we playing? Instant reply? In other words, he had been staring at his phone screen the whole time. What about the group chat? Lin Feng scratched his head. Yunhu sent another message. What are you playing? Lin Feng, how about I compliment you and you compliment me? Yunhu replied, sure, you go first. Lin Feng, you're so handsome. You have good taste, Yunhu replied. Chapter 882. **CK. Lin Feng almost flipped the table. Didn't you say that if I complimented you, you would compliment me? You were clearly complimenting your big brother. Did you really think that I was just a naive person? I also have the ability to analyze words, understand? Lin Feng was just about to rise when Yunhu sent another message. Yunhu sent another message. I heard someone confess to you? Lin Feng's rising heart shrank a little, but he replied righteously, I already rejected her. Are you happy to be confessed to? Yunhu's eyes dimmed as he typed slowly. Lin Feng felt that it would be too fake to say that he wasn't happy at this moment. He was simply secretly happy. We are all men, we all know that I would definitely be happy to be confessed to. Yunhu arched a brow and replied, is that so? Then why did you frown when I confessed to you and even fought with me? Lin Feng wanted to jump again when he saw that message. How could it be the same? You confessed to me so that you could sleep with me. You confessed to me so that you could sleep with me. Who wanted to sleep with me? There was a fundamental difference, alright? Unfortunately, before Lin Feng could express his thoughts, Xuanhu sent another message. Since you guys like to be confessed to, I can confess once a day if you can take it. Lin Feng recalled the scene of Xuanhu confessing to him. He really had enough. He hung up his phone and didn't want to speak anymore. But he obviously couldn't remain silent. Because the moment he threw his phone on the table, he heard his mother praising someone in the living room. Who, you've become even more handsome. Your face is completely different from our little Feng's, it's sharp and handsome. Lin Feng, he was handsome too. Who exactly was his biological son? You guys are going to another city for a competition today, right? Have a good competition. The main thing is to keep an eye on little Feng. Andy has a feeling that something has been bothering him recently. Mother Lin was born beautiful and wore a professional suit. She was over 50 years old, but her skin was very fair. It could be seen from whom Lin Feng had inherited his good looks. However, at this moment, Mother Lin seemed to want to say something but stopped herself. Yun, who had always been calm and knew what she was talking about. He didn't finish his sentence, carrying his backpack on one shoulder. There was a laptop and mechanical keyboard in the bag, but he didn't seem tired at all. At this moment, his height gave him the advantage. Did he do something to make Auntie worry again? Come here. Mother Lin glanced around before pulling Yunhu to the side. She lowered her voice and said, "It's like this. This morning when I was helping little Feng pack his things, I suddenly saw a book. That book. The content is about the psychological trends of people with unique sexual orientations. There are also some physiological analyses. Even though I heard that guys who like to play games like to play as female characters, it shouldn't affect little Feng's sexual orientation. What exactly is wrong with him?" Yunhu tightened his grip on the strap of his backpack. He knew why that guy was reading those books. Lin Feng was reading them on his behalf. He wanted to know if his sexual orientation could be cured. "Auntie, don't worry, he is probably just curious. I'll talk to him." Mother Lin smiled. "I'll be at ease with you helping him." Yunhu didn't know how to deal with that guy when his elder entrusted him with such a task. At this moment, Lin Feng hurriedly ran down the stairs. His black trousers were half rolled up, revealing a portion of his calves. This person's hairstyle was similar to his temperament, always curly. Fortunately, he had inherited it well, or else such a coarse man would not have the characteristics of a straight man. Lin Feng basically had all the characteristics of a straight man, including the jealousy of other people's children. "Mom, people who don't know might think I was adopted. If you really like Lin Hu, you can urge him to find a partner in the future. Don't always urge me." Lin Feng jumped down with a gust of wind. He didn't even zip his backpack properly and there was a black, "OK" sticker on his face. When Mama Lin saw her son, her true nature was exposed. She slapped him on the back. "Look at you, you're already so old. Can't you be more mature? Look at Hu Zi, you're clearly two brothers living in the same courtyard, but why is there such a big difference?" Lin Feng had to say that his mother looked especially beautiful on the surface. But that wasn't her true nature. Taekwondo, martial arts, and the fact that his mother had beaten his father into submission when she wooed him. Lin Feng didn't want to talk about how he felt when his mother slapped him in the face. He almost vomited blood. At this moment, his brother still had a conscience. He instinctively pulled him behind him and raised his hand to glance at his wrist. "Andy, we have to catch the high-speed train at 2 p.m. Don't worry, I'll keep an eye on this guy." Only then did Mother Lin stop. She was indeed a changeable elite. Facing Yunhu, she was natural and unrestrained, gentle like a mother. "Alright, I'll leave little Feng to you." Lin Feng really wanted to tell his mother, "What's there to befriend? The guy you like is still thinking about how to sleep with your son. I'm struggling so hard." Mother Lin was probably still worried. She pulled her sloppy prodigal son to the side. "I'm warning you, even if you..." With that, Mother Lin felt that this wasn't the time to be too direct. She could only be more reserved. "Don't be picky when you're hungry. Don't bully anyone, especially Lin Hu, even if he's handsome, understand? Bear with it at night and don't do anything out of line." Lin Feng really didn't understand. What did she mean by, "be picky when you're hungry"? Did the Empress Dowager misunderstand something? But Mother Lin didn't give her confused son a chance to understand more. She walked over to Yunhu and said in a low voice, "What happened just now will be a secret between you and Auntie. You know that little Feng has been stubborn since he was young. He's only in his early 20s and his ability to accept new things. I've tried to understand him, but he's probably just confused and doesn't feel threatened. But if he dares to do anything to you, tell Auntie." If it really doesn't work, he might be good at fighting since he's been training with me since he was young, but in fact, his legs turned to jelly. Remember this when you need to retaliate. The Lin family had been neighbors for many years. Xuanhu already knew Mother Lin's character. He arched a brow. Auntie, you mean that Lin Feng might do something to me? Chapter 883. Xuanhu's expression didn't change as he listened. He was as steady as a mountain and his eyes were deep like the ocean. He was indeed the trump card of the Supreme Alliance. He calmly replied to Mama Lin, "Okay. If that guy could really do anything to him, he would definitely cooperate. Why would he cripple him? He didn't need to do anything. Even if he allowed him to get close and didn't reject him, he would try his best to keep him by his side." Of course, Xuanhu had always known that even though Lin Feng looked innocent, he was a straight man and wasn't easy to change. It wasn't just difficult. Xuanhu was clear that if it wasn't for his current identity, that day he would have to take a few hits to his face. He thought he could try his best. He could try his best to make him accept. If it really didn't work after the competition. Xuanhu glanced up at the guy who was still pulling his hair. They would separate for a period of time. No matter how uncomfortable it was, he had to quit. Lin Feng wasn't sure of Xuanhu's thoughts and didn't know what they were talking about. All he knew was that before he left, his mother kept looking at him as though he was a perverted man. The warning in her voice made him puzzled. He was dressed rather well today and hadn't done anything wrong recently. What was wrong with his mother? This was an unsolvable problem. Time trickled by. 1:30 p.m., Jianghu City South Station. There weren't any express trains here, only high-speed trains and intercity trains. Hence, it wasn't as congested as the West Station. Even so, there were still many people at the security checkpoint on the second floor. Bojio and Chinamo were both dressed in pure black uniforms. Not only were they long legs and narrow waists, but they were also handsome in different styles. One could only imagine the scenery. Since yesterday, Bojio hadn't been free to deal with her scumbag father and those who called themselves fans. She could only entrust it to Lawyer Bai. But according to Lawyer Bai, Manager Feng had been dealing with those who wanted to find a chance to attack Supreme Alliance. Those people wanted to make an issue out of yesterday's incident. Manager Feng cooled down first and then released a statement, only mentioning the infringement and not the actual incident. It was obvious that this kind of person with no moral bottom line would get more arrogant the more you cared about him. Besides, his motive was impure and he wanted to gain popularity. As long as Feng Yi ignored him, they couldn't gain popularity even if they wanted to. On the other hand, they couldn't wait to quarrel so that they could become famous. It was a pity that Manager Feng had been in this business for a long time and had encountered all kinds of troublesome kids. How could he please the other party? Even if it was a little troublesome, it didn't affect his intelligence. No matter how many hours he slept, Manager Feng was still smiling. He was good at socializing with people, but the Fu family was the most difficult to deal with this matter, because no one knew whether Su Mei was the only one who knew about Little Spade's disguise as a man, or whether Fu Zhongyi also knew about it. Manager Feng wasn't sure about this matter, so he asked his boss. As a criminologist, such an analysis wasn't difficult for Qin Mo. He replied calmly, if Fu Zhongyi knew about this, he wouldn't be in such a state. He would definitely expose it to the media. That's something a businessman like him would do. Manager Feng also found it hard to understand. This is the first time I've seen someone treat their own child like this. Fu Zhongyi has become like this because of Su Mei. Even without Su Mei, Fu Zhongyi's nature is the same. It was rare that Qin Mo didn't hang up immediately. Selfish, lustful and greedy, abandoning his wife. At that time, Qin Mo had been thinking if that was the case, it was not surprising that the guy had become like this. It was even less surprising that he wanted to do something with hacking skills. But even so, Qin Mo glanced over and sat in the resting area, his fingers tapping on the keyboard. He still felt that something was amiss. Bojio wasn't aware that the Almighty had his eyes on her again. She sucked on her lollipop, her silver hair covered with a black cap. The cap was facing backwards, looking refreshing. That kind of handsomeness would naturally attract the attention of others. After all, he wasn't a celebrity and wasn't that famous. It wasn't so exaggerated that everyone knew the two of them. After all, esports had yet to become the era of true stars. However, none of these reasons could stop his handsomeness. If Qin Mo's face was suitable to be photographed in a high-end magazine, then Bojio's face was suitable to be remembered. Once, when Spade Z had first appeared, the first thing the media had said when they had seen the youngster's appearance and skills was, "This youngster will definitely be popular in the future." Now that sentence had come true. It was really popular. They had only been sitting there for a few minutes, but it had already caused quite a commotion. Most of it came from the girls. But it was thanks to everyone's enthusiasm. It allowed the other members, especially Shui Yaoyao, to see the waiting area where they were about to board the bus. But this time Shui Yaoyao hadn't come alone. After a family reunion dinner, Uncle Jiang had insisted that Jianghu send her off. She had rejected him twice, and just as she was about to reject him for the third time, he had already picked up his keys and left. This way Shui Yaoyao couldn't reject him anymore. Otherwise, everyone would be able to see that there was something wrong with her and Jianghu. It hadn't been easy for the relationship between the family to recover. Even though her mother hadn't said it, Shui Yaoyao could tell that her mother had been doing well recently. It was probably because Jianghu's resistance towards them had lessened. But it wasn't suitable for anyone to know about her and Jianghu, not to mention the elders. Especially her current relationship with Jianghu. Yesterday, when she had slept in the Jiang family's house, Jianghu had sneaked into her room after the lights had been switched off. The agreement between the two of them would last for a long time. She understood even if he didn't say it. Hence, it wasn't suitable for their parents to know. He probably wouldn't let Uncle Jiang know either. Shui Yaoyao knew what she was to Jianghu. But Shui Yaoyao didn't understand why he wanted her. If he was willing, there would be many girls who would sign such an agreement with him. But she still vaguely knew because he had said, "You won't pester me." It was probably because she didn't pester him. Regardless, Shui Yaoyao's heart was as calm as still water. And she also knew that the Jiang family's relatives had started to look for a marriage partner for Jianghu. That way the agreement might end earlier. At this moment, Bojiu saw Shui Yaoyao. She stretched out her arm and hooked it at Shui Yaoyao, her lips curved devilishly. Chapter 884. Jianghu saw the youngster's actions, his eyes dimming when Shui Yaoyao walked over. Bojiu hadn't forgotten about the birthday party. She wanted to get close to Yaoyao so that he would understand that Yaoyao had a family too. "How's the preparation?" the youngster asked, tossing another candy into Shui Yaoyao's hands. Shui Yaoyao smiled, her mood lightening. "It's all right, I can coordinate with Feng Shang." "It's still a 5v5 position?" Bojiu arched a brow. Shui Yaoyao wasn't sure. "I wonder what Almighty Qin's arrangements are? Usually they would only be distributed after they arrived. His Highness Jiu must be aware of this." Bojiu did know, but it was just to make them look closer. The moment Shui Yaoyao sat down, she placed her arm lazily on the back of the chair. Her silver hair was hooked by the black cap, her long legs slightly crossed, looking extremely cool. She turned to speak softly to Shui Yaoyao. The intimacy was eye-catching in Jianghu's eyes. Jianghu hadn't forgotten why Shui Yaoyao had agreed to be with him. She had been worried that he would help Wu Zhen investigate young Master Fu. He hadn't wanted to agree, nor would he agree. At that time he had just wanted to provoke this woman. Jianghu hadn't expected it. For this person she was willing to do anything. It seemed as though the moment he appeared, there wasn't anyone else in her eyes. Things were different now. His hands tightened under the sleeves of his suit, the car keys imprinted in his palm. Jianghu tucked his hand into his pocket and glanced up at Chinamo. "I have something on, let's drink when I come back." Chinamo replied, not saying much. Hence, when Shui Yaoyao lifted her head, he was already gone. Bojiu finally asked the truth. "Why is he sending you off?" It wasn't easy for him to reject Uncle Jiang. Shui Yaoyao chuckled. It probably wasn't easy for him to endure until now. "Is that so?" Bojiu lifted her lips playfully. It wasn't clear if it was intentional, but when Jianghu turned back, she placed her arm over Shui Yaoyao's shoulder. Her clean and handsome face was filled with a smile. Jianghu's cold gaze swept past the two of them. When he retracted it, it was obvious that his gaze had deepened. Even the way he walked didn't seem like a noble young master anymore. There was an indescribable coldness in him. Shui Yaoyao didn't notice the undercurrent, but it didn't mean that Chinamo couldn't see it. He glanced at the smile on the young man's thin lips and the action of patting his shoulders. Without further ado, he reached out and pulled up the back collar of the young man's shirt. He lowered his voice and said, "Come with me, let's talk." Shui Yaoyao wanted to save his Highness Jiu, but when Almighty unleashed his aura, he was handsome and hard to deal with. In addition, the young man smiled at her and shook his head. Shui Yaoyao had no choice but to sit down again. Her heart was a little perturbed. The Almighty wouldn't do anything to Highness Jiu, right? Chinamo wouldn't do anything to the person he had just eaten. It wasn't like he could eat again at the train station. But discipline was still necessary. Chapter 885. Bojiu arched a brow, her fingers moving. When she flipped over, her clothes fluttered in the wind, swapping their positions suavely. She seemed excited and mischievous. Do you want to kiss? Qin Mo glanced at the person pressing down on his shoulder, his eyes sweeping downwards. Are you trying to avoid my question? What question? Bo Jiao glanced at the Almighty's expression. I was just provoking young Master Jiang to prevent Yao Yao from being taken advantage of in the future. It isn't easy to survive in a wealthy family, I'm just being considerate for my team member. If you're in a bad mood, it might affect tomorrow's competition. Qin Mo glanced at her. Does that mean you're in the right? Humility is a virtue. Bo Jiao smiled, enjoying the feeling of being pressed against the wall. Everyone knew about the high-speed rail station. There weren't any blind spots. This position could be temporarily invisible, but it was impossible to be invisible forever. The passers-by glanced over instinctively. Gossiping was human nature. For example, they were now very clear in their hearts. How could a beautiful young man press a very imposing man against the wall? Bo Jiao enjoyed the gazes as it proved that she was better than the Almighty in certain aspects, right? Due to the difference in height, Qin Mo had to lower his lids when he looked at the youngster. His gaze swept over her curved lips, his voice calm. Since that's the case, let's go back to the previous question. What if I say yes? What do you want? Bo Jiao hadn't reacted. Just then, someone pressed down on the brim of her hat, lifted her up and kissed her. The tip of her tongue entered, the slightly cold minty tobacco scent sucking in all the air. Bo Jiao's hat was obviously useful, it could cover their faces. But because of that, no one would disturb them. The kiss lasted for a long time, making her blood race. When the sound of her heart rang, he pressed his lips against hers and gently kissed her twice. His voice traveled over, kiss. Bo Jiao felt that she was at a disadvantage this time. The kiss she had imagined wasn't supposed to be like this. She had already pressed the Almighty against the wall, shouldn't she be the one in control? Fortunately, the kiss ended. It wasn't just Supreme Alliance's group, Lin Chintao's group had arrived as well. Just as Lin Feng was about to buy a bottle of water from the vending machine, he saw something he shouldn't have seen. The naive and innocent him was stunned. You forgot to move. Qin Mo glanced over, his gaze cold. Lin Feng immediately came back to his senses. With a serious expression he said, Leader, I didn't see anything. You guys can continue. After saying that, he immediately turned around and left, not even taking the mineral water from the vending machine. But in his heart, it was as if 10,000 alpacas were running. Do you know that imagining it is one thing and seeing it with your own eyes is another? Captain and Little Spade, 2 men. *CK This was a devastating scene for a straight man. He felt that his wife was leaving him. What was going on? But, could it be because both of them were very handsome? He actually found it a little pleasing to the eye. Mainly Little Spade was too daring. He actually kissed the captain forcefully in a corner. Chapter 886. When Yunhu saw Lin Feng was in such a state. He seemed to be in a daze and his face was obviously red. Didn't you go to buy water? Where's the water? With Yunhu's reminder, Lin Feng remembered that he hadn't taken the mineral water, but he couldn't explain the reason. He sat on the chair and shut his eyes. I'm not thirsty anymore. The person who had been asking for water wasn't thirsty anymore? Yunhu arched a brow but didn't expose him. When he glanced up, he saw the two of them walking over from the direction a certain someone had come from. His voice was filled with understanding. Did you see something you shouldn't have? Everyone knew how naive Lin Feng was. He jumped immediately. His gaze came into contact with Yunhu's face, especially when he saw the beautiful shape of his thin lips. For some reason he felt a little awkward. He asked in a rough voice, What can I see? With that he sat back down. Unfortunately, someone came to expose him. Senior, you forgot your water. It was Bo Jiao. She sat beside Lin Feng, her voice soft. Did you get a shock? Lin Feng wanted to reply, but when he met Yunhu's gaze, he pulled her to the side. When did you and Captain progress so quickly? You even kissed. You saw wrongly? Bo Jiao arched a brow. The Almighty was warning me not to flirt. Lin Feng pouted. I saw wrongly? Do you think your big brother is blind? Kissing is kissing. I still have that much tolerance. But how did you manage to get the captain? That's too amazing. What? Bo Jiao laughed lightly. Are you going to use the same trick on Almighty Yun? Lin Feng covered her mouth. Don't spout nonsense. I was just chatting casually, why are you so agitated? Bo Jiao moved his hand away, a playful smile on her face. That wasn't a casual chat. With the two of them guiding him, Lin Feng felt uncomfortable no matter what. Why wasn't the bus checking the ticket yet? He decided that he would sit next to anyone but Yunhu. Otherwise, his imagination would run wild and his imagination would run wild. On the other side of the waiting room was Lin Chintao's team. It was different from Supreme Alliance's free-range policy. Almost all of them were sitting in a row, wearing the same attire and sitting posture. With the club's agent and assistant leading the way, the atmosphere was very strong. However, the atmosphere was too tense. Even someone as talkative as Lin Chintao didn't come over to greet Bojio. Instead, he glanced over. There seemed to be a lot of things to say in that one glance. It was really hard on this chatterbox. Bojio stuffed a hand into her pocket, the candy in her mouth. When she bit down, she realized that her lips were slightly swollen. She licked them, and when she met the Almighty's gaze, she stretched. She was used to being free and unrestrained. She really didn't fit in with a professional esports team that had strict control. It could only be said that their styles were not the same. Bojio hadn't expected him to come out of such a place. Now, it seemed that this was not the case. The teams were already calling out names. If anyone was late, the consequences would be unthinkable. Even Lin Chintao became extremely calm at this moment. Chapter 887. Rao Rong was still the same as before, sitting at the front of the team. It was obvious that most of the team respected him. Especially Lin Chintao, he was practically reliant on him. But why was his whereabouts so suspicious? And was it really a coincidence that he had appeared at the cinema yesterday? Bojio pondered over the matter, her gaze meeting Rao Rong's. Through the crowd, Rao Rong's gaze deepened. He must have sensed someone looking at him. Bojio smiled, unperturbed. Rao Rong's expression didn't change, he averted his gaze and lowered his gaze. In reality, Rao Rong had never intended to guard against her. He had placed all his precautions on Qin. After yesterday's incident, Rao Rong finally understood how dangerous profiling was for them. Rao Rong wouldn't show it no matter how bad his mood was. Even though he wasn't sure what was going on, he didn't show it. His phone was ringing and it was obvious who had sent the message. Rao Rong didn't turn his phone on, his gaze on his manager as he listened to the rest of the team. But things didn't always go smoothly for a famous team. For example, the competition. All the playing order was determined by the club's coach as well as the people above. For the first match of the 1v1, everyone assumed Rao Rong would be the one to fight. After all, he was the only one who could go toe-to-toe with Qin. But Supreme Alliance wasn't aware of it. The club handed the 1v1 match over to a very young person who liked to play as a warrior. There was a hint of a smile in his eyes as he swept Rao Rong a glance. Lifting his chin, he accepted the responsibility. Lin Chintao wanted to stand up when he saw the outcome. Rao Rong reached out to press him down, his voice calm. "Don't let Supreme Alliance see the conflict between us." Lin Chintao tightened his fists, turning his head and punching him viciously. He really did not expect that one day the captain would receive such treatment. How could the newbie win the 1v1? Was it because his father was an investor? Lin Chintao was infuriated, the anger emanating from his body. His eyes turned red, but he remained silent. Sometimes, even in esports, someone had to compromise in order to keep the team going. And that person had always been the one who had sacrificed more for the team. This atmosphere did not last long. Fortunately, the ticketing on the high-speed rail had already begun, so the conflict did not intensify. Rao Rong was the first to stand up, followed by his teammates. The two teams met at the ticket gate. Sparks flew from the collision. Even before the match began, there was already the momentum of a dragon and tiger fighting for supremacy. Neither of the two captains was weak. It was the same for the team members. Everyone knew that this would be the most anticipated match in the national finals. The confrontation between Rao Rong and Qin. The confrontation between Lin Chintao and Bojio. Who was the strongest leader? Who was the strongest assassin? Which team was more qualified to challenge Xuanhuan? This battle was of utmost importance. Due to the strong presence of the two teams, and the fact that they were all young and handsome, the two teams were too eye-catching. Many people in the queue were watching. Compared to the other party, Supreme Alliance obviously didn't have any commercial organizations following them. Qin said, "Let's go." Chapter 888. It was a 3-hour journey. At the start, Lin Chintao had intended to cause a ruckus in Spade Z's carriage. But now he wasn't in the mood. He glanced out of the window, and when he couldn't take it anymore, he turned towards Rao Rong. "Captain, Li Nua's skills aren't enough to stop Qin. If we send him out first, we will definitely lose." Rao Rong stopped drinking, twisting the bottle cap. "Don't worry, Qin won't be participating in the 1v1. I'm guessing they will be fighting a 2v2. 2v2? Lin Chintao was shocked. Qin has never fought a 2v2. Rao Rong chuckled lightly. That was in the past. Don't we have Spade Z now? Why don't we have a 2v2 as well? Lin Chintao almost jumped in excitement. I definitely won't drag down Captain's fighting strength. Next, it was another round of nagging. Most of them were talking about how he would specially target little Spade after the competition started and how he was the most handsome person in esports. He watched as the person beside him returned to his usual self. Rao Rong glanced into the distance. Sometimes it was troublesome, but it was the best. Lin Feng, who was in the other carriage, wasn't feeling as good. He was frustrated. How hard was it to change seats? They weren't even on the same team and he didn't know how to save him. He tilted his head, meeting Yunhu's gaze. Lin Feng's seat was near the window, making it inconvenient to leave. He grabbed a book and placed it on his face, preventing him from imagining something he shouldn't be imagining. Yunhu adjusted his seat, stood up and headed towards the dining car. At least that was how it looked to others. But in reality he only left after the youngster left. Bojio was smart. She stopped absent-mindedly when she noticed someone following behind her. She turned on the tap, pretending to wash her hands. When she glanced up, she caught sight of the person in the mirror. Yunhu wasn't tactful, his voice calm. What exactly happened when he went to buy water? Bojio smiled devilishly, still wearing her hat. Senior Lin, haven't you recovered? It's nothing, I just kissed Captain. No matter how composed Yunhu was, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows when he heard this. Bojio leaned over. This is good news for Almighty Yun, it has enlightened him. He will probably be thinking about this the entire night when his team is resting. Yunhu glanced at the youngster. The next time you do anything with Captain, try to avoid it. That guy isn't like Captain, he doesn't have a strong mental endurance. Afraid of scaring him away. Bojio smiled playfully. Yunhu didn't deny it. After he got the answer he wanted, he walked back to his seat and looked at Lin Feng for a moment. Then he sat down and lowered his voice. It's just a kiss. Is it that serious? Those movies you watched in the past, are they all food for you? Lin Feng pulled the book away from his face and thought to himself, F***, how can that be the same? What kind of film am I playing? What were they looking at now? I'm starting to doubt my life, do you understand? But in the end, Lin Feng didn't say anything. He tilted his head and thought about life calmly. Chapter 889. Try what? After Lin Feng finished speaking, he coughed heavily. His expression was manly. F***, why was he stuttering like baby Feng? He couldn't lose in terms of aura. Yunhu arched a brow. What else can we try? Since you are so concerned about it, why don't you kiss me personally? Speaking of which, you still have your first kiss, right? Lin Feng was on the verge of flipping the table. Who are you looking down on? Who said I still have my first kiss? I have a girlfriend too. His few girlfriends. Everyone was well aware of this. They got close to him because of Yunhu. Lin Feng still remembered the last time he broke up with his girlfriend. It was because he saw her hugging Yunhu's waist, her head tilted upwards as though she was about to kiss his chin. But even so, he had to maintain his image. Yunhu's gaze sank in that instant. Even his voice wasn't the same as usual. That's all? With who? You don't have to worry about that. Lin Feng was serious. Don't say that I don't want to teach you, we are going to compete soon, don't think so much nonsense. But Yunhu insisted on this answer. With who? Lin Feng's eyes darted left and right. As a straight man he would never admit defeat in front of other men. Hence, Lin Feng's face turned red as he lied, it's the girl who wanted to seduce you. Yunhu retracted his gaze, his fingers clenched tightly. Lin Feng felt that he had finally managed to deal with it. It was so embarrassing to have his act exposed. Phew. If Bojio was here she would definitely say, Lin Feng, you naive boy, you're provoking him on purpose. It was a pity that Lin Feng didn't have such thoughts. After the conversation, the thoughts that had been troubling him didn't surface. He just tilted his head and fell asleep. The bathroom on the high-speed train was usually cleaner, especially since Jianghu City was the first stop. Even if it wasn't clean, Bojio had to stay in there to receive a message. This wasn't a message she could receive in front of the Almighty. She had to hide in the washroom. Bojio glanced at her phone screen. It was an email, every word related to Rao Rong, including his background and his father's death. Bojio's fingers stilled, her eyes darkening as she replied, focus on investigating Rao Rong's father's death, there's something fishy going on. In a high-rise apartment in the city center. On the screen in the 5v5 hero arena, a red-clothed assassin swept his sword horizontally. When the announcement of 4 kills rang out, he jumped back, making it impossible for the person chasing after him to even catch a glimpse of his shadow. His gaze fell on the lit-up phone screen, and his beautiful thin lips smiled. His face was clear and handsome, and his fingers moved slightly as he replied, "Okay." On the game page there were still people shouting, "Almighty, wait, add me as a friend." Hoshino had already exited the game, his fingers tapping on the keyboard as he opened an unknown forum. No one knew the existence of the forum. All IPs will be hidden. That place had the most perfect firewall. It could avoid all the Internet Surveillance Bureau's detection. That was one of Z's important ways to obtain information. The young lord of the hacker world wasn't just a joke. Because the firewall here was made by Z himself.